Dustin Curtis is a puppeteer and the founder of Trivia Puppet Company out of Seattle. He is also the current president of the Puppeteers of America and the director of the 2023 National Puppetry Festival happening this July in Maryland. I sit down to chat with Dustin about his journey to puppetry, his travels abroad working with other puppet companies, and what we can expect at the National Festival on this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Dustin Curtis, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Well, we're all doing good. I'm very excited to have you on here and talk to you about your puppetry journey and some other big, huge projects that you're working on that we will get to. But I always like to start, do you remember your first exposure to puppetry, the first time you saw puppets?
Oh, that is a good question. I can remember my first role, but not probably the first puppets that I saw. But from very young, that's why I can't remember. But I do distinctly remember in elementary school being very proud to play a moving tree and manipulating my arms and some leaves on them very effectively, I think. So.
Was that a homemade costume, or did the school provide the tree outfit, or did you make it?
No, it was homemade. So
homemade, yeah. Are your parents creative? When they were growing up, did they have a creative streak?
Yes, my mother is. My father, not so much. She was a visual artist. So back in the old days, she used to be, I think they called it a window dresser. So all the different department stores and setting up displays. And then on the side, she painted and did a bunch of other little small projects. So always encouraged us to be creative.
Oh, that's great. That's great. From a young age, was there sort of this drive or desire to be a performer, to perform?
I think there was. I didn't recognize it as such back then, I think. But with my mother's influences, we were taught to really embrace our imagination and to kind of go into that natural sort of storytelling. And she encouraged it in whichever way we wanted to explore. You know, I could list the 2,000 hobbies I've had from making ashtrays at the time and ceramics to other things. But looking back on it, because of the media I was seeing as a child and going forward, yes, it was moving towards that creative bent. So.
And what you mentioned the media you're watching as a child. What shows or movies or whatever influenced you?
Oh, sure, yeah. I'm I'm in the tail end of Gen X there. So like anyone under the age of 50, lots of Henson movies and TV shows coming out. A lot of stuff from Sid Croft that you would see on television and such. And lots of books, actually. Too many to really go into, but we were encouraged to be avid readers in my family. So
that's great. Did you have a favorite like Henson movie? Was there one movie overall that really impacted you?
Well, it used to be The Dark Crystal, I think. And speaking from a perspective of like a 10-year-old. And then I think when Labyrinth came out, much later, that one became my favorite, which kind of ties into my personal taste with music and everything else. I think David Bowie was a big influence on that. So.
And growing up and having your mom kind of, champion your exploration of the arts, so to speak, did you study arts in school?
I did, yes. I lived in Las Vegas for high school. And I was a founding member of, it's now called the Las Vegas Academy of Performing Arts, but at the time it had a bunch of other, international studies and visual arts. And oddly enough, I did not go for performing arts. I went as a French major. So you kind of did that college and high school at the same time, but you had extra electives, which is where a lot of the different creative things were happening there. And about my sophomore year, I decided that I did want to go into theater. So I double majored in that, which is hilarious because I don't like acting, which is, probably bad for this business. But I just wasn't connecting with, it was very musical theater inclined in what it did. And though I loved the people and I loved what it was doing, I just never was like, oh, this is me. I'm going to be, the lead singer or something like that. So the school was really effective in keeping us from, washing out and throwing raves or something out in the desert. So they moved me into show production, which informs a lot of my career going forward from there. And things just kind of took off in the last 2 years with that work.
And were you working like backstage at on productions and things during that time?
Yes, yeah, they sort of customized it. Looking back on it now, there was a introduction to kind of the backstage production features. I did a lot of extra help in the box office. Then it was backstage with some tech, and then just in actual like administrative producer different things with the directors that were there at the time. And it was pretty well rounded, but I think my interest was in actually doing a lot of the production and planning work.
And did that carry on through college? Did you go to college, or did you just go right into work,
I
or
did
what did you?
not go to college. I went straight to work. Anyone who's been to Las Vegas probably knows the Fremont Street experience in downtown's kind of the covered canopy with the flashing lights. That was opening as I was ending high school there. And so we interned for 2 years there. And then I was hired on to do, they have kind of seasonal entertainment and parades at the time. So I was hired on to do those. After that, I then moved into, you may recall, the bookseller Borders Books. That was
Mhm.
pretty big, I think, around the country. They were growing, and I got hired in as a PR event manager for them, and just kind of had a career trail away from that.
Well, that's great because that's maybe not directly involved with puppetry, but having that background certainly helps it when, like as we'll talk about, planning the national festival and just planning your own shows, like because you know how to deal with venues and how to that whole process that goes in with booking a show, even if it's for one night.
Yeah, yeah. I will point out something really funny about high school. When I was saying I was finding some dissatisfaction with theater, I did have, still that informal interest in puppetry up to that point where we actually took a puppetry class, and we kind of burned out on it there. And I set puppets down and focused more on this entertainment bin for a good amount of change before my 30s, when I was like, oh yeah, I was reminded I liked puppets and picked them back up. So I think that's probably important to mention during this time.
Yeah, what during that time, I mean, before you say you put them down and went on to other things, what style was it, like Muppet style puppets? Is that what you were working on, or?
No, no. Most of them were hand puppets that we made. Some arm and rod ish, but nothing in a Henson style. It was very amateur. It was just us playing around in kind of a freeform art class. But I think more what we were focused on, my friends and I, were just some storytelling, and kind of making our own skits, going on like that type of thing.
Yeah. And was it like were these skits? Did you film them, or were they? Did you do them on stage, or
Oh no,
just
no.
for yourself?
Yeah, just for ourselves. I was very lucky to be in kind of a cafe culture. Everyone was an artist, and we did all these other projects. I think I might have some photos. I also did photography, where we did some of that, but it was also the '90s, the early mid '90s, so a lot harder to record some things in the moment.
Right, right. What was it that happened in your 30s that
Yeah.
made you pick puppets back up and go after them again?
Again, still lucky to have a lot of creative people in my life during this time. And in my inner friends group, a friend named Derek had decided to revisit some stop motions, and like to watch them. So Brothers Quay, Hans Svankmajer, and decided to just randomly put on a puppet show in his living room when we were hanging out there. And so I saw it, and I was just like, "Oh God, I forgot how much I like puppets. Let's do this." And I guess if you get to know me, I can be very decisive, and I'll say something like that, and then 6 years later, I'm doing it. That's kind of the catalyst to get moving. It took more time than that, but so really, Derek reminding me and doing that, and then I was also lucky to be somewhat puppet adjacent. My best friend is a doll maker and is heavily involved in performing arts and lots of circus and sideshow and things like that. And so it was not hard to find a couple puppeteers to talk to and really have them open doors for me. So.
That's great. And was that, at this moment when you refound this love, was it like let's put on a show, let's do a theater show, let's like what were you or was it just starting to experiment with the art form?
It was really starting to experiment with the art form again. Like I said, everything I did was just kid playing with puppets. It was never anything serious. And really, I didn't know where to start. I mean, you know what puppets are, and you've seen them, and you can identify the things that you've loved. But I guess the easy answer is learning the language, and kind of understanding what you're getting into there. So, and mind you, I was in my 30s, so I had both a full time career, and I also produce a lot of nightlife in my spare time, the reference spare time. So there was not a lot of room to immediately jump into that, but just starting to hang out and get a couple mentors to start that process, and then just kind of going with what my aesthetic and what my thoughts were while trying to balance all that other stuff.
Yeah, well, that's great. It's funny because you and I think, are about the same age. You might be a little younger than I am, but there was this time where even if you were really into it, you couldn't just look up a YouTube video on how to do it. Like you kind of had to. It was this process to hunt down the information. And I'm sure somebody older than us will say, like, "Well, when I was your age, we had one book, and I understand that, but it's." So let's talk about your mentors, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really great. Who were they, and how did you find them?
Oh, sure. Well, right now I live in Seattle, Washington, and I have for about 15 years. And at the time, so this was just about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, asking my best friend, Cook Teflon, who she knew, she recommended to put me in touch with Dimitri Carter, was one of them, who runs the Carter family, is in this area and has a puppet theater, as well as Gene and Ticknap, who ran a company that's called Thistle Theater. And so both of them were very generous in just making time to say hello. Actually, I think I bothered Dimitri with emails until, he was like, okay, just come hang out for a little bit. Um, Dimitri let me hang out, spend time with marionettes. He's like, oh yeah, pick up that collectible 1920s marionette from somebody famous. No problem. You know what you're doing. And, volunteering where I could. Again, I was balancing like a 60-hour work week with any of that. Jean was a little bit more, she was always in her studio. So I was invited to drop by and spend some time with her. And at the time, I call them my puppet sibling, Zane Exactly, is also from the area. So we spent a lot of time hanging out with Jean. And, I don't have a lot of technical skills in the sense of like sewing or building. And Jean was like, hey, that's sew something today. All right, why don't you find this song and we're going to make a sock puppet, and then you can, start, show me what you can do with it, and doing that. So I was really grateful for both of them for investing that time into me.
I have always found that this art form, it seems maybe more than others, but maybe not. I don't know. But is people are a little more giving, like with like, hey, how do I do this? Well, here, I'll show you how to do it. And
Very much so, yes. And YouTube was around, but I think also, like you said, it was not as easy to find the resources that you could find now. If I'm like, hey, teach me how to do this. And also, I think just culturally, that's not something that I do. I don't. It seems silly now because I am online so much, but personally, I'm not online very much. I'd rather talk to someone about their art than watch videos and never-ending stories. But the generosity of the community in general is what inspired me to do all the extra stuff that I like to do in the puppet world. So, I volunteer a lot for P of A in our local puppet guild. And I did so because I had those skills, and that was easy for me to kind of pay back that generosity with what I had at the time. Because, I would not give you a very good puppet show at all. And maybe still not, who knows? But I do it because I love it. Not
right. And back then, when you started, you said you were working full time and all this stuff, but were you like creating slam pieces, or were you starting to think like, oh, I could do a theater show about this? Like, what were you working on back then?
Yeah, I did. I did a lot of stuff at home, just experimenting. Being in an urban apartment, you can only have so much of a studio, especially when you're getting started. But yeah, I did little things like that. Looked into different resources. I also there's another puppeteer here, Rachel Jackson, who was doing some courses at the time, and I think we may have actually met through Rachel. And yeah, so I took some basic puppetry courses with Rachel just to get some more skills down, and it really started to get an understanding, of a structure of a show. The best friend that I mentioned before always produced a lot of pop-up events, that kind of thing. So I did several with her. But really, my first foray, regular stuff, was in the puppet slam. So we have the Fussy Cloud puppet slam up here, which Rachel was running. It still is, but I think is about to step down. And I've been doing that pretty consistently now for almost 8 years, 8 or 9 years. So that's nice. And then I've done slams all around as well. I've done my own shows now. Before the pandemic, I haven't done much since the reopening.
Yeah, well, and I went up a few years ago to the Fussy Cloud Puppet Slam, and I think it was the first time where I was like, wow, this is like because there were so many people there, they were so excited to see the show, and we had done slams down, down in LA, but it's like, wow, this is everywhere. People will want to come see puppets, like it was really cool to go be part of those shows.
Yes, yes, I love it. It's such a great audience, and you get a crossover too. People who not necessarily would seek out a puppet show, like if I was selling you tickets right now to one, I don't know about that, but for some reason they're just drawn to that format. And I'm lucky to what is it, the regional circuit? I used to do the one down in Portland, and then I'm Californian, so we used to when I go back to LA, would be in LA and do a couple of those as well. Nothing on the East Coast though.
How do you think puppet slams helped you grow as a puppeteer?
They gave me the space, to be honest. You can make up your own show, and I usually throw them in my friends' bars because, again, I work in nightlife, so I am able to be like, "Hey, can I borrow your space on Tuesday night?" Yeah, and I think the slams provide just that little bit more of a support structure for you to worry about the art and not so much about the tech or the booking or anything else in there. And the what do they always say? Too short to suck. Yeah,
Right.
in general, that's true. I'm less worried about that, but there's a little bit less pressure. I think that we average about 10 minutes at our slam, but I think that's just enough time to get a good idea and work with it without having to worry about developing it into a full blown show or something so short that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and I always say that, I mean, the same, I'm going to say the same thing about puppetry festivals as well, but slams are just a great place as a puppeteer to go and maybe see something in a style you don't normally work in. And then that will give you ideas of things that you could do,
Hmm.
or like different avenues to explore. Because I remember that puppet slam, seeing Rachel's Kentucky Fried Chicken,
Yes.
piece was like really great, and was like, oh my gosh, she built this whole piece out of a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket, and it's just like you never, I don't know, that would never come into my head to do that. So they really are an amazing, amazing place.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it encourages that to be experimental, like you were saying, different styles. I primarily do shadow puppetry and shadow theater. That's what I love. I like that. What's the word now? Spoopy, the spoopy aesthetic that goes on. But I also like vaudeville a lot, and I do have these like $3 puppets I bought off of somebody that I just absolutely love. They have their own personalities and whatever. And the Puppet Slam gave me a chance to where I made a 6 minute show about them, and I had never done that before. And I don't think I would have been confident enough to just be like, "Hey, come to the bar and see me do this," So again, it's that support structure to kind of work it out and get an idea, and then you can grow with it a little bit more. So I think that's what I like most about it.
Yeah. And I think also getting up on stage and doing it, even if it doesn't work out, you still have that experience of getting up in front of people. And like
Mm-hmm.
the more you get that, the better performer you are, no matter what happens in that moment during that show. It's going to make you a better performer, I think.
Definitely, yes. I can remember one of my first slam pieces. Was using a projector for this particular one, partially projector, and the ghost of the theater stole this piece because I'm neurotic. I'm like Madonna. I'm like, let's rehearse it 100 times. Here it is again. Here it is again. We're fine. It's good. It was set. We sit down. I'm like, where's the piece? It's not there. You don't see it on the ground. And like I had enough experience to not worry about it. I just used my own hand instead of the piece that was cut out. But my assistant, who was less experienced, was just about to panic and freeze up. So yes, it's great to build that. It will go wrong.
Right,
Do it,
right.
tie it, bring a spare in your pocket. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I did comedy for a year. I did, songs, and like the first time you drop a pick on stage and you can't find it, and then you're like, how can I play the rest of my songs? I don't have my pick. And then you just learn, no, you bring a whole pocket full of picks
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
that you just get another one. It's yeah, great experience.
Yeah.
So in 2015, you founded Trivia Puppet, your company,
Mm-hmm.
and what was the decision behind that to finally make this into a formal company?
Well, I knew that it's something that I wanted to do. And for me, it was a structure to help prioritize that in my life. Like I said, I'm a busy person. I don't really like that word so much. I'm greedy for experiences. So if there are 3 parties that night, I will go to all 3, whether even if it's for 10 minutes. But because I was at the time, I was a manager at a art school. And so, that is demanding on your daytime a lot, especially because you're always getting questions and whatnot, as well as the nightlife production that I was doing. So by creating the vehicle, it let me know that I was doing it seriously, and that part of my mission statement is it's really just there to let me explore and do what I want. If it's going to be talking brooms or we make a movie, doesn't matter. It's going to fall under that. But I knew that I'd want to start with a structure to get going.
And you wound up like quitting your job, right? Like you just to explore puppets fully.
Well, they said I was so amazing and I made millions of dollars. I walked away. Yeah, no, it was very difficult to find the time to do it right. And I joke, I've been doing this now for a decade, but I still have a lot to learn, and that's just because of the amount of time I can put into it, and that's okay. It's my journey more than anything else. But at that time, I was starting to accelerate in what I wanted to do, and to do more performing. And I was very lucky to have met some people at my first national festival around 2015, and learned about different resources. And around that time, I applied for the Unima USA education grant that they have, and I was very lucky to get it. And in that particular instance, I did puppets in Prague. So I was really interested in learning about wood carving, which Dimitri started to teach at my school, but it was very hard for me to do because I worked there. You get interrupted a lot. And, I could have just gone for the summer, did this course, and that was it. But I thought it was a great time to pivot, and to put more energy into more of that freelance lifestyle that we all love and enjoy. So I was also able to get into some instruction in Italy in shadow theater, which is kind of informs a lot of my work that I do. And so at that time, it was like, hey, I'm quitting and I'm going to go join the circus, basically. So I left in April of 2017, and just had planned to spend the summer in Europe, and then would figure it out from there.
Yeah, how much? Because you're someone even to this day who I know does traveling to work and experience other puppet things. But how was that experience going to Italy and to Prague, and learning different styles from there?
Oh, wow. It was, what's a great word for it? Foundational, to be maybe not so imaginative. Going into Puppets in Prague, it was my first time in the Czech Republic, and meeting the wide variety of people who come in. And of course, it's just a walkthrough in the time of what you're going. And like, I'm not very technical, so there was plenty of nice people holding my hands trying to show you how to do it right. But it's doing the experience and getting that exposure to it, which was great. And also being able to check out some of the blacklight theater that they did there in Prague. I really loved it, and was inspired to go. There's a lot of nice museums in Prague that, for me in particular, focused on like shadow theater and the history of Czech puppetry, which we know is rich. So that was really great to just learn. I have like a huge amount of photos from that. And then when I went down into Italy, I think that was the first time that I really found puppetry that clicked with my aesthetic and kind of where I wanted to go in the storytelling. And I may not be able to articulate it well, but it has that like Italian storytelling passion polish on a lot of the work that comes from the company's called Teatro Gioco Vita, Theater of Life Games. And Fabrizio Montecchi does a lot of the instruction there, as well as Nicoletta. So they do some great shadow theater work, very modern, very innovative. So it's not so much, shadows on the screen. It's more manipulating light and environment. And it really was just like going to art school. It just kind of like, hey, look at all these ideas, think about it. And then you're like, wow, wow, wow. It's so technical, and you've built all this stuff. So it still informs my work. And maybe this upcoming summer, after certain things end, I can start investing in a lot of setting up the right environments, like the lighting, and a lot more of the technical aspects. Because I do most of my shows in my very small apartment here in downtown Seattle. I don't have a studio. So I just moved some furniture around, and it's my studio.
So do you, I'm assuming the answer is going to be yes, but just to ask for sure, would you recommend to to puppeteers to travel and study in other places.
Always, always. And you did mention just earlier about traveling. I do that in general. I spent a lot of time in the UK in the late '90s personally, and not puppet involved. But whenever I find an excuse to go somewhere, be it a puppet festival, a puppet show, or perhaps I'm visiting someone, I turn it into more like a grand tour because you're already going. So why not? Like if you're going to, you won a contest and you're going to go have dinner in Paris for a night, just take a tour around it and see what puppet things you can find. You meet so many people, and like we were saying, it's such a great community. They'll say, "Hey, I have this great festival. Why don't you come?" Or I really liked your work. I did this once, and then you start having that collaboration, and it just I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to talk before we move too far away from Trivia Puppet, because one of the things I love on your website is, you have sort of like your about, how it came about. But I love this line: "The company believes puppetry is for everyone, and we strive to provide access at low or no cost to underserved and disadvantaged populations." And what I love about that is like the second line, sort of your mission statement. So could you talk a little bit about that and how your company helps with that?
Yeah, yeah. I'm really big on community, and I think if you kind of look at the events that I do, and in my own work, you'll pick that up. But I really rebel against the model of what many theaters have operated on and still do, and that's fine. Where you're like, okay, I have this puppet show, I'm going to go tour it in the school district that has a lot of money and can pay me for it. That's great. These kids see the show and that. Growing up in an urban environment, I'm aware of people who were very poor. I mean, we were never rich at all, but I always had enough from my parents, luckily. And, the arts are so important to me growing up. And so many people don't get that experience because the schools can't afford to have something, or there just isn't the opportunity to pay to take your kid to the show or anything like that. So I try to bring cultural events like that into a community as much as possible. So basically, my company runs like a nonprofit, but I can't afford to do the paperwork, so I don't, and I just don't ever make money off of it, and that's fine. It's not about money for me either. And so I do work still, and I put money into my company to support that. The big things, one of my big projects that we do now is I founded a puppet festival in Seattle called the Puget Sound Puppetry Festival. Typically, it's annual. It depends on funding when it comes through, but the model that I'm operating now is to find like world class puppetry. Like I just had Alex and Olmsted, who were generous enough to come out, and we staged it in a city here in Greater Seattle called Renton, which is a nice place, but it's usually not going to show up on the touring circuit where you have it. And Renton was very enthusiastic about this idea, so we were able to provide. There were 3 shows, so about 1,000 seats for free to the community to drop in and see this puppetry and to see the artists, and then go have a craft fair outside. And I also made sure that it included our local puppeteers, so they know what you have in community, and you can highlight the local arts that are there and the people who are working hard.
Excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit about just a couple of your shows that you have listed on the website. But one is the Peppercorn Show. Can you tell us a little bit about Peppercorn and how that show came about?
Yes, yeah, that is the vaudeville show that I was talking a little bit about, experimenting in the Puppet Slam. So one of the puppet theaters here was selling some old storytelling puppets from their collection. I guess that's what you want to call it, for like $3. And I was at their fundraiser, and I was like, oh, this looks great. I'll buy it. It's this like dirty gray bunny hand puppet. And I loved him. I loved him. He looked so scrappy. And then I think one of the puppets was from Stacey Gordon. I love her work, and it was a really unique one. And I just fell in love with them. And they ended up getting lives and stories and backgrounds. And the Peppercorn Show eventually will be the non-shadow stuff that I do, because it's very just like a lot of comedic banter, silliness. Every weird scenario I've seen on TV melted into my head, reproduced in puppets, basically. I work at a college now running a special events program. And so I now have my college degree, but because I get the classes for free, I even took voice lessons. And we were doing it in puppet voices. So that's kind of where all this skill is going into there. And they're just little silly things, a little more family friendly. I don't do anything that's adult or blue label, but it can be really slow for kids because it's up in your head. And so, yeah, it's the fun show. And I think maybe after this summer, I'll have time to develop it a little bit more.
I love how that, because I've had things happen too, where it's like you get a puppet and then you just kind of live with the puppet, and you know, you might have an idea right at the very beginning of what this puppet could do, but it does take time. It takes, like, you know, a long time to come. You know, it's like you look at, if we're talking about it, the original version of Kermit the Frog was not Kermit the Frog, how we know him and love him today, you know,
Very
and it
much.
took several years for that to develop. And so I love that about puppetry, where, you know, your puppet, when you first get it, might be one thing, but then it can be something completely different.
Very much, yeah. You know, the name Peppercorn's Coloring is where that came from. I was like, oh, you're a peppercorn, all right, and you're basically me as a puppet. But you know, that smudgy bunny, his name is Mr. Ruffles, and Mr. Ruffles was really cranky all the time. But he's gotten nicer over the years. He's much more supportive of his friends than I thought he would be when he started out.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your shadow
Mm-hmm.
shows too. And I apologize if I'm not saying this right, but La Grata,
Mm-hmm.
is that
Yeah.
so? Can you tell us a little bit about that show?
Sure. And I haven't been on my website in a while. I'm glad you picked that one. I just performed it. So a lot of the work that I do, because I love stories and I'm an amateur classicist as well. So, and I'm half Greek. I'm half Greek, half Mexican. So I dig into Greek myths a lot. And I've always enjoyed just how confusing they can be, especially when taught poorly in classes. You know, people are like, all right, you know, but I feel that's because it's just, you know, the story's been retold so many times, people have kind of lost the plot or the details, and that it can be very symbolic as well. And so, kind of the thought behind my company is that it kind of, when you're on a journey and you're at a crossroad and you're like, do I go left or right? Like, what's the potential of each one? That kind of that mystery, that's what I try to capture in my work. And so when I find a story like that, I do try to break it down into elements like basically different lenses. You know, is this symbolic of something? Is this something deeper we can go into? Does it relate to whatever's going on right now? So in La Grata, that is based off of Plato's Cave, and we were doing it just because I think a lot of the state of the modern world was becoming a lot more apparent at the time in my friends group, and I just wanted to make some commentary on it. You know, people are chained. This is what you're watching. Someone breaks free. They see outside, come back, and then they're crazy for telling you what they saw. Those are my cliff notes. I'm not reading them off of anyone. And so I just thought it would be really fun to kind of explore that and bring it to life. So in that show, it's the parade of the images that I create going through. And then I made these puppets. This was also for a slam. I made the puppets out of newspaper and string. So it was also a construction exercise for me in doing that. And I put them on stakes, and I made it really austere looking, and used some strong lights, and it's about him breaking free and going up and creating the imagery. And the thing with like working with Teatro Giocavita is, instead of just like showing you a tree or, you know, this person and like walking them across the stage, you know, a little bounce, it's like simulating the movement of walking through the forest and tying it in with the light of the sun coming out and things like that. So it's very cinematic. Maybe that's what I'm going for the flow. So that's the piece. It's really fun. It's about 6 minutes long, and we custom made some sound effects and music for that. And then I just was able to revive it. There's a local park here outdoors that wanted to welcome the spring, so they hired me to play it inside of a large fountain, since it's kind of on a big scale to do it.
Well, and what I love about it too is, I mean, and this just shows you how much you don't know about puppetry. Is, you know, like if I think shadow show, I either think it's someone behind a screen and they're putting the things up against the screen, or it's an overhead projector and they're projecting things on it. But
Mhm.
the picture on your website of La Grata is like there's a light out front and you are projecting these big shadows up on the thing, and it's just amazing, like, to think of it in a different way, like, oh yeah, that's
Mhm.
shadows too, you can do that as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of that magic that I told you that I discovered when working with Fabrizio and everyone is, the biggest takeaway from their work that I have is I love to be seen manipulating those puppets. Like if you're just staring at the stage, there I am with this puppet in my hand in front of a light, and it's cool. You know, you can see the show, I'm still articulating it, you see the puppetry. But then if you're watching the shadows, they're like life size, or they're blowing up and they're big, and that is what was exciting to me about it. Because like I said, I love almost all forms of puppetry. Whenever anyone does anything, I think it's great, but I don't have a personal interest in pitting shadow puppets on a screen as much. I do use projectors, but I found them to be very limited, so I've kind of turned away from them over the past 5 years. But And it really makes you think because you're now incorporating the entire environment on the stage, and it's a real challenge for me because being in those slams, they're quick and dirty tech, so I don't have a lot of time to explore the light. And when you're working with Teatro Giocavita, you're in their private studio with custom built lights, and you can hang things and spend all day. Here, it's quick and dirty, and you're usually off. But that's the learning. You're like, oh, I will never do that again because now I see that I could do it this way better, and that's what I enjoy out of it.
Well, that's amazing. I hope to get to see it someday because just the picture on the website alone was like, oh, I'd love to see this show.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about guilds because out of all the puppeteers I know personally, I think you are the one that is a member of the most puppetry guilds and organizations from around the world. And I think it's amazing. And I'm kind of following in your footsteps. But for you, what is the benefit of joining a puppetry guild for an area where you don't live?
Sure. Community. And also, like I was saying, that exchange that you get with talking with people. I'm a union man. I love to join a club and call it good. But when I first started and said I was going to take this seriously, I joined the British. I'm never going to get the name right because it's off the top of my head. Puppet Model Theater Guild. Only been a member for 10 years. Why would I know its name? Puppeteers of America and Unima USA, because I was like, oh, those are the ones. And I adore it because you get the magazines, you get the newsletters, and of course it's much more interactive now because of the digital has erased the divide that you get. But also because of my travels, especially back to the UK, I would like to say that I know many UK puppeteers well because of that. So when I go back and visit friends, I think one time I bothered Little Angel Theater, which is one of my favorites, and I was just like, "Hey, it's Mr. Puppeteers of America. Can I come and visit and get a tour, maybe?" And they were very generous. They let me see a show and took me backstage. I got to talk to Lindy Wright for a little bit, and I did not handcuff myself to the puppet bridge that they had there, though I was very close to doing so. And I just I like to meet people. I get excited about that. So much like I kind of hustled Dimitri a little bit, kind of the same thing. I'll look you up and be like, "Hey, Grant, I'm going to be in LA. You're a puppeteer. Do you want to hang out? Can I come to your like?"
Yeah.
So that's paid off over the years, and being members of these organizations helps to meet new people or learn about new people and just to really be informed, I think. So
Yeah, and I think what I've been doing is sort of at the beginning of each year when most of a lot of the guilds, not all of them, but like the membership comes up from renewal in January and stuff like that, and maybe I have a little holiday money from grandma or something like that, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put these towards this, and for the past few years, I've kind of been like, well, what's a new one I can join? And I always like joining ones like I just joined the British Guild this year, but I love ones that have a physical magazine or something that you can get in the mail. Because even though, it doesn't take that long to read through it, I just love that like little window into other, like the digital magazines are great too. And I'm always on the computer, so that's not a problem. But I love getting the magazine and looking through and seeing what's happening there.
Yes, I always pack one or two when I'm on the plane. I don't like to get online when I'm on the plane, so that's my thing. Yeah, and you can still learn a lot. I have a really big interest in Punch and Judy. I have no skills or training in it whatsoever. The years are flying by, so I should get started. But I'm a member of the Punch and Judy Fellowship, and that grounds me in a way, so it stays relevant in my life, and I'm reading about things that are happening, even if I'm not fully involved. I at least have a finger in it and can understand the pulse of what's going on. So lots of value to that.
Well, let's talk about Puppeteers of America.
Okay.
And speaking of organizations, this is the big one. How did you get involved with that and getting even more involved than just joining Puppeteers of America?
Sure. Yeah, well, to be social, I joined our local puppet guild, which was the Puppeteers of Puget Sound, and was very happy to do so. I think relatively shortly, that it was probably 2013 or 2014. Was happy to be part of it. It was like many guilds, it was having a generational change, so it needed a lot of people to step up. And I volunteered to be on the board of it. I think I started as president. I can't remember anymore. And Gene Antignap, who I mentioned earlier, was kind of the caretaker president for a long time. So stepped into that kind of, and I should preface, I didn't just like decide to take over a guild or something like that. I have a lot of from that production experience in school, I have a lot of project management. I've run nonprofits, I manage departments and things like that. So it's there's some leadership background before I did that. And so again, it's a great way to meet people. And that kind of led to a deeper involvement. I also was a member of Puppeteers of America. It was very distant when I first joined. I didn't really understand it a lot. I'd get the magazine, and it very hard to understand what the programs were in particular to me. And then Gene was talking about the National Festival at the time, which was the 2015, the Yukon one. And that's when I decided to go. That was my first, so it wasn't that long ago. And, like everyone, it's a life-changing, wonderful experience to go through, and you made so many friends. And so shortly after that festival, I contacted Paul Robinson, who was the executive director at the time. And I was just like, hey, I'm interested in volunteering, what can that look like? Because as I've said before, my schedule can be complex sometimes. And I ended up volunteering on the communications committee. So I have actually been a member of the communications committee since 2015. Probably the sole surviving member at that point. And things just kind of, moved along. I was very generously supported by the guild members for being president up to, I think, 2019. And then Paul Robinson in 2017 asked me to think about serving on the board of directors for Puppeteers of America. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that. That sounds kind of fancy and high up. What do I know about puppets? I mean, let's be real. I've been doing this for like 6 years. But he's like, no, it'll be great. And so I did. And I was elected in. And, this is that big year where I was doing Europe and all this other stuff. So great energy. And it was, I don't regret it. I'm at the end of my 6th year now. And it's been a journey, let me tell you, for sure. But it's giving back to the community that was very generous to me, and that's the best way that I can do it. But is also a growth experiment for me, because it is now in various iterations have taught me how to run a larger organization, both for myself and just projects in general going forward. So it's been pretty fun there.
Not only running the organization, you are running the event that the organization is putting on as the director of the National Puppetry Festival that's happening this July. And do you regret it all becoming the director? No, I'm kidding.
No, I do not. There are moments like any job where you're like, oh my gosh, and I call it a job. I'm just a volunteer. I actually I donate to Puppeteers of America to do like large amounts of work, but so that's my passion. But I do not. In the end, I love bringing people together and having a great time, and that's what it is. This week, maybe not so much, because just impossible deadlines and stuff like that. But my board service, I've been behind the scenes a lot. Very quickly, I stepped in to be a treasurer. And what do I know about treasurer? Not much, but I know how to work with budgets and to understand them. And this was a time in Puppeteers of America where it's quite a great institutional change. It's that transition into modern digital generational changes that are going through. Just people are older and want to retire. It's nothing else other than that. And just the way that things were done don't necessarily translate now. So there was a lot of maintenance that needed to be done in the organization. And when you're working with a full group of volunteers, you can imagine it's hair raising sometimes when you go through. But we've walked through all these years of updates and progress. I would hope that's what most people would call it. And during that time, I stayed treasurer as long as I could. I then went to be vice president. And I don't know how effective that was. That you only have a year, and when you have long-term projects, you can set the stones and the groundwork for others to do it. But making instantaneous changes are usually not what happens. And then I've had the honor of being president this last year to kind of to sew up some of those changes. And the reason I mention this is because it all does tie into the National Festival. It's being done differently. It's always done a little bit differently, but a lot of behind the scene things needed to be updated to be compliant with current nonprofit practices, legal, fiscal laws, pesky IRS, things like that. And just making sure that, it's an experience that can be sustainable is probably the word I'm looking for there. And so I've luckily had the support from the board and membership. Thank you, everyone, for supporting me in being selected to run this project. And I've been working on it for 4 years, because we were planning it for 21 and we hit the pandemic and I put it on hold. And then we had to do thought very quickly with some changes that were not participate.
Well, you talked about the changes sort of behind the scenes, but what do you think will make this festival unique, sort of in front of the scenes that the people will see compared to past festivals? Notice I'm not saying this is the best festival, but I'm just saying what makes it unique compared to other ones.
Yeah, I would say that we are reimagining some programs. That's not a trademarked word, right? I think the biggest one that stands out for me is the community day, which is now plural. And in previous iterations, we've always invited the community to come by, have some hot dogs with the puppeteer, see some shows, or buy a ticket, come by if you're curious, puppet curious. I think they love using that phrase. And that's wonderful and I like it. But one of my strategic things about Puppeteers of America is kind of keeping eyes on like how are we moving towards the future. We're not a member services organization. We have members, we take care of them. There's benefits for being members, but we're all members because we believe in the art of puppetry and we want that support structure for it. And if you read our IRS letter, we're an educational nonprofit. That's what we do. We promote and advocate for puppetry. And so I wanted to expand the Community Days program to kind of embrace that model. And then a little bit about what we discussed on in my mission statement about engaging the right community as well. So you do have that diversity aspect to it, but not just in the sense of like economic or racial. It's just about opening doors to people who may not want to be a puppeteer, but they like a show, or someone who has watched all the Henson things, but doesn't know how to find a show that they want to see. And, I spoke to how important I think those creative skills are in life as a youngin'. You can, I like to phrase it, you learn to tell your own story, no matter what it is. If you become a painter, if you become a puppeteer, if you become an actor or an engineer, even, these things will inform you for it. So we really beefed up this program. It's basically a festival in front of the festival. So when there's overnight attendees, that's all of us going, having our shows and all our activities. But there are also additional activities for the public just to drop by, come sit into this workshop, come see this movie about a puppeteer, come hear about the exhibit that we have and these interactive workshops and skill building. And, we have a great puppetry and autism panel that the Jim Henson Foundation is helping to present there. And that's just something where we can just tell the community, hey, come check us out, learn about us, be passionate about the art form. So I think that's the most exciting one for me.
Yeah. Well, I know you can't, as the festival director, I don't want to put you on the spot to pick one, but was there any show that you booked this year that you were like, yes, I'm so glad we got, because I know you love all the shows,
Mm-hmm.
but is there one show where you're like, just like, I'm so excited for people to see this show and I'm so glad that we got them?
That is a really great question. I'm going to take a second just to take my personal filter off about what I'm excited for, because I do love them all. I would say that the one that I really jumped for is brand new, Annika's Elephants by Annie Evans, that we're bringing in. It's brand new, which I think is exciting because it's that energy that you get when something's just coming out of the hangar there. And it also, I think for me too, that there's a lot of public element to it. Like we're going to have the community built in to see portions of it. So that one's very exciting for me. The puppetry is beautiful. There's a lot of thought and care that goes into it, and all shows really, but that one really stands out in my mind.
Yeah, I'm not forcing you to pick one over the other. I'm just, which one are you excited about? And I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you the same thing about workshops. I
Oh
know you'll be
my.
running around like crazy at the festival, but if you weren't, what workshop would you be taking?
I do have a secret plan to manage so effectively that no one will notice I'm not there, so I can take all these workshops. That one could be a lot harder to answer. There are so many things that we have. I mean, we knew that we had to skip a national festival, so we're giving you two in one is what we're doing. And the talent vent is so wide. I would say, maybe two. So we're having the puppet parade, like we traditionally do, but we are also hosting a day-long workshop on Friday to build those parade puppets. It's geared towards teens and the public, but puppeteers who may be interested can drop in during the day. It's kind of an open session. I think that's really exciting that someone can come in and build their puppet and parade it around the next day if they really wanted to. That one stands out there. Gosh, there's so many people. Yeah, we have people coming out that trained Disney puppeteers, and we have some wonderful folks coming out from Mexico to do some more puppet building and storytelling. God, there's even a busking workshop. That one was really exciting for me as well when they get in there.
Excellent. Well, it's going to be a lot of fun. What, Ben, if there's a puppeteer out there who is sort of like on the fence, like, oh, I don't know if I should go to this. What do you think? What do you think they'll get out of it if they attend for the first time, if they've never been to a festival before?
Inspiration. And like I mentioned, when you go to your first one, you're blown out of the water. You cannot comprehend that this many people like talking with socks on their hands. Like, what's wow, this exists, and you see that community and you feel it. But it's not just like, oh, now I know a bunch of puppeteers. That's cool. I think that because you're seeing these shows, which may be new to you, especially if you're a first timer, you're inspired to see work that you could potentially make or incorporate into your own. Everyone is skill building. People are feeding off of that energy. And one of my favorite things is just to run around with a book and write down all the ideas that come out and then see where you can go with those. And I would encourage everyone to do it. I know it's expensive, especially now coming out of with all the cost rises and such. But, I think on my first one, I couldn't even afford the meal plan because it was all last minute. And I just quit my job to join the circus, the puppet circus, like pack some bread in your bag or something, or, you only have to eat once. You won't die. You're fine. People will feed you. But do it. That's the best thing I can do. So we're trying to create as many opportunities as possible. There's day passes. We will have a virtual component that we'll be able to offer. We're kind of making it up because we need to understand how to do that. So with generosity, I think most people will at least be able to access some portions of it because, I also have an eye for accessibility, and not everyone has both economically the opportunity to travel, but also for health reasons may not be able to. And I want to be really mindful about tying us all together when we can do that. But yes, do it. If you can't go, do it now. There's still time.
Well, I will say that the 2019 was the first one I had ever been to, and I had been to the O'Neill before, but I'd never been to a festival. And it was amazing. I had so much fun. I met so many great people who I'm still talking to this day. And so I was just honored when you reached out to me to ask me to be part of, a small part of this next one. And I'm very excited. And we've got some fun things planned. So if you're out there and you're hearing this, it's June 1st. It is not too late to get yourself out there, because it's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So one other thing I wanted to ask about is the theme for this festival is generations. And can you talk a little bit about that and why that is the name of the festival?
Yes. It's not the first time that the theme has been generations. I'll say that first. But I mentioned earlier that we are seeing a change out of persons who may be retiring or passing along, unfortunately. And with us being separated for 4 years, it really brought to the forefront of thinking about, here I am now a middle-aged person. I'm 23, and this is what I'm doing. I'm currently doing something. And then there are those who came before that were leading the path. And then I think of younger puppeteers that I see that are just starting out, and where is that going for the future? So we really wanted to deep dive into that and to honor those who have come before. We have some surprises around that. And, that's kind of what we planned our keynotes on. So we're lucky to have Sid Croft with such an amazing career and to be able to talk and honor about that. And then Terry Fader, who is currently doing amazing things, shows and TV. And then we have a panel of new puppeteers who are telling us what they're doing with their work and where they want to go. So it's a really exciting theme to deep dive on.
Excellent. Well, as I said, I'm super excited. I can't wait to get out there, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And if I talked about you're on the fence, get off the fence and get yourself out to the festival. Well, Dustin, as we wrap up here, I always like to ask at the end, what has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
Oh, that's a special one. I would say I would have to have two. Being selected to work with Teatro Giocavita was such an honor for me, and I consider them family, and I send them annoying emails all the time. That was a great honor to be taken in like that and to have that knowledge shared generously. Administrative wise, I would have to say being president of Puppeteers of America, even if it is just for a year with the end of my board service. But there are so many people who have stepped up to serve in that role who are great and amazing. And of course, some who are legendary like Jim Henson, that it is a great honor to be able to have been selected for that. So.
Excellent. Well, Dustin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, and we will see you at the National Festival.
I can't wait. Thank you, Grant.
Big thanks to Dustin for being on the show. For a link to Dustin's website and to the National Puppetry Festival, check out the show notes for this episode, episode number 84, over at underthepuppet.com. And if you'd like to hear even more of my talk with Dustin Curtis, download the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android and click on the gift icon in the listing for this episode. And we hope to see you at the 2023 National Puppetry Festival happening July 18th through the 22nd at the University of Maryland. Head to puppeteers.org for more information and to register. Now it's time to announce the winner of episode 83's giveaway for 2 autographed WFMU stickers and a copy of The Art of the Puppet by Bill Baird. The question was, what was the name of the puppet pilot that Andy's friends made? And the answer was Red Pepper. And the winner is Julie Scarborough. Congratulations, Julie, your prize is on the way. Well, now it's time for this episode's giveaway, and it is for one 2023 adult membership to the Puppeteers of America. To be entered to win, simply answer this question from the episode you just heard. Where did Dustin Curtis say he took a lot of pictures during his trip to Prague? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by June 15th, 2023. One entry per household, and due to recent issues shipping the prizes to winners, these giveaways are now only open to those listeners with a mailing address in the United States of America. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and be announced on the July 2023 episode of the show. Good luck! I want to send a special thank you out to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Eve Cunning, Kathy Crawford, Andrew Calcagno, Tony Urbano, Brandy, David Akers, Paul, Scott Armstrong, and Vicky Sebring. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. And thank you for your support. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line, no one ever does, at 818-806-9604. Or click the Call the Show button, no one ever does, in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can also send feedback via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com. Or you can connect with the show on Instagram or Twitter by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. This episode featured music by Dan Ring and was expertly edited by Steven Staver. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2023 Saturday Morning Media Grant Pachoco executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.